Hello, I'm Sally Pointer and welcome to the next instalment of How to Build a Warp Weighted Loom. Now last week we set up a tablet woven header band and our warp threads. Now if you watched that video you'll remember that we've set these up at a really wide spacing. This is actually far gappier than would be ideal for a proper project. But this is a test warp. I really just want to see how this loom is behaving and troubleshoot placements before I put some effort into a really good setup. So we got that bit done in the last episode. This time we need to separate this out into two sheds, one that will sit at the back, one that will sit at the front. The one that sits at the front pretty much stays put. The back one is the one that does all the moving as we proceed to weave, and we're going to attach the weights. So this time round we're going to open up our shed, attach our weights, push a chain across to hold everything into place, and that should do it. When we set these warp threads up, we did them using the loom itself as our warping frame. So the threads started at the top where our tablet woven border was being set up, came round a peg here, came round a peg here, and then came, oh I'm not very good with this, down to a peg in the corner. Now that's going to give us a really nice long warp for our purposes, plenty to tie off. Now at the end of the last video we put two security ties on to make sure that where this went round its loop we separated it out into two natural sheds. So now we can safely take this off the pegs and have a look at what we've got. Is that lined up all right? Okay. So going down to these, we should now have one set of threads that, oops, I've got a twist in this, that's why that's being awkward. There we are, that's better. One set of threads that will become the back, one set of threads that will become the front. Now, it's always worth checking for any little tangly bits, and also just use your common sense, look at things. Are we really getting one thread forward, one thread back? And if I put the camera up towards the top again, hopefully you can see that we do indeed have one set of threads for the back, one set of threads for the front. So, oh sorry, you can tell I'm used to tripod work, can't you? Okay, we are now safe to cut that warp between those strings. I'm not going to take the security strings off yet, not till I'm absolutely certain that we've got what we want. And for the moment we're going to deal with the threads that naturally hang to the back. I'm just going to move the other ones out of the way. So what we're going to do next is tie on our loom weights. Now last time we set these up with a string to make it a little bit easier. I personally like to put the knot down inside, so I've got a nice smooth bit here. How many warp threads you put on a weight will depend a lot on the thread, the project, but I think I'm going to put probably, I'm going to try 12. Let's see how many colours I've got. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 7 colours there. Now, if I did just those 6, I think that's going to be a little bit too much. Let's try 9 to start with. Again, this is a test warp. I might adjust this later. So I'm going to separate out the first 9 threads. I'm going to check that they're lying nice and smoothly. Oh, let's bring this over the top so you can see. Okay. Having worked out roughly where I want the loom weight to hang, about there, I'm going to bring that loop through the loop on my weight, and then I'm going to sort of chain stitch up the tail, just pulling one loop through the other, and it can be quite loose once you've got the first bit on. Now this does two things. One, it attaches it, and it also tidies up the spare warp so it doesn't get tangled until we're ready to use it. Nearly there. Now for a very, very long warp, you could have doubled this section before you did it to make it easier. But again, test warp, we're not overthinking it. Tuck that through the edge, and that should hang quite happily. Okay, let's hang that down the back, see how it seems. Okay, that's under a fairly heavy tension, but I think that will do all right. So I'll do another one now. I decided that I was using 9, so that's all of one colour, half of another. Separate those out. Don't want to rush when you're doing any of these. Warping up and dressing a loom takes time. If you rush it, you only ever end up having to go back later to redo things. So take a moment, get things untangled, let it behave. So, pulling a bit through, crochet chaining it up. Nice thing about a crochet chain is if it goes wrong, you just pull the end and it unravels. Once you've got your first bit that holds it to the weight locked into place, you can be quite loose about your chaining up. It's only to hold your warp threads in an untangled manner. I'll do one more to show you and then I'll carry on with the other few. This is a very small warp, it's not going to take very long. So in my case, 9 threads. You might find you can get a lot more threads onto your weight, and in a really good setup, one of the ones that I'll do for a finished piece of fabric, I will have my threads more closely together. I probably will put more of them onto a weight at once. What have I got snarled on there? Oh, I'm snarled on the knot. That's why I usually put the knot down inside. That's why I usually do that. Oh, we are getting there. This basic chain stitch looping is quite useful in weaving. You can use it for all sorts of different things. We'll use it a little bit later on in this video when we chain up. But for now, it's really just about keeping those weights nice and organised, and with your spare thread, moderately cat-proof. Okay, I'm going to do the last one, and then we are going to chain up across the back. I will see you in a couple of minutes when I've done the next bit. So all of our loom weights are tied in place now, and for this tiny little warp we've just ended up with 4 weights. That's absolutely fine. So these warp threads at the back are actually the ones that are going to end up doing most of the work eventually. They're going to pull forwards when we open the shed, drop backwards, pull forwards, drop backwards. So it's very important to make sure that these aren't dragging on the floor, that they're not tangled up, that they're moving freely. But there is a problem with anything that's tied to a weight. If you hold it by itself, it's going to have a tendency to rotate and twist and tangle. And we want to do something that's just going to stop these threads getting into a mess. It also helps stop them pulling in as you weave. And we call that chaining up. You can use pretty much any thread you like, as long as it's relatively smooth and unfuzzy. I've got a linen thread here today. Now I'm leaving it on the ball, or cone in my case. I'm just going to tie it to the side of the loom. Any old knot will do. I tend to use one that I can untie by pulling the end if I need to. And then once you've worked out where the outside edge of your weaving is going to be, just make a slip knot in it. That's going to be the start of our chaining. I'm just going to try and move this camera a bit closer. Is that better? Yes, I think it probably is. So I'm going to chain up probably 2 warp threads at a time. Bring the main piece of the thread behind, pull it through the loop. Pull it up so it's close but that there's room for the threads to slide. That's important because as the work progresses on the loom, this will be moving upwards and you don't want this to tangle it up. Find your next couple of threads. Take the thread that's attached to the ball behind, bring the loop in front, pull the end through the loop to make a new loop. And you're going to keep doing that all the way across. Now for a very important piece of weaving, doing this really, really accurately is going to be important. Anything you can do to help set the width and structure of your fabric before you start weaving is generally quite helpful. So I'm onto the threads from the next loom weight now. By starting choosing them fairly high up, I can be sure I've got the next 2, and I can just keep adjusting my loops so that I get a really good even tension all the way across. Okay, 2 weights down, 2 to go. You can probably already see how much more evenly spread that is. I'm going to stop the camera now. I'll keep doing this till I get to the end, and then all I'll do is I'll tie the end to the other side. So the chain has been made all the way across. I've still got a loop at the end. It still runs. So I need to secure that. And often the easiest way to do that is just to take a really nice long bit not stupidly long, clip it off, bring it through the end, and then we're going to tie this off on the other side. Where are we? We are here. I'm just tying this off again in a way that I can undo easily if I need to. I'll drop the spare bit of thread at the back, and that is the back warp finished. Now the front warp we're going to do in exactly the same way. Move this back a little so you can see, but this one hangs in front of the beam, and this one, once it's set up, pretty much stays put. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing again. I'm going to take how many did I say I was doing? 6, about 9. So it's 1 colour and half of the next. Separate those out. Attach them to a loom weight, remembering this time to pull my loop inside. Smooth down from the top, make sure you're reasonably well organised. Find where it's going to go, bring it through, and then it's just the end comes through the loop. A couple of quite tight ones to start with to secure it, and then just that chain stitch loop again to use up the rest of that warp, stop it from tangling, keep it out of the way, have it ready for use later on. Apologise for that scuff on the outside of my hand. I'm quite conscious that keeps showing up. Had a bit of a fight with a tree when I nearly fell into the river a day or 2 ago. The tree won. So that one is going to lie along the front there. So I'm going to do exactly the same as I did with the back warp. I'm going to set up all of my loom weights all the way across the front. Then I'm going to chain across in exactly the same way. I'm going to finish the weights. I'll put the camera back on to show you the chaining just as a reminder, and then we'll have a little look at where we've got to. I've tied in both sets of weights now, and I've spotted that I made an error on my first batch. Now, if I come around to the back so you can see, when I tied on originally, I was using all of one colour, half of the next, so 9 threads in total. By the time I got to the other side, I've actually got 2 colours, so 12 threads in the things. That's not ideal. I'm actually going to run with it with this because this is a test warp. I'm really doing this just to check that the loom is functional. When I set up the larger loom, the adult size one that I was making at the same time when we started this series, that's something I need to check for very carefully. It's sloppy. Now, I've tried to correct it on this one. So I've got 9 threads, 9 threads, 9 threads, but then I didn't have the right number of threads left over. So I've just split the remainder into 2 bundles. So I've ended up with 4 weights on the back, 5 on the front. It's not perfect. I'm going to run with it. I've also got a broken warp thread here. Now, I've got, oops, can you see? Oh, where's it gone? I'm going to knot that in at the top. I've got just enough slack to thread a needle, tie it off into the top. There are already a couple of knotted threads in this warp which were part of the setup of the yarn. Again, if I was doing a very, very important piece of weaving, I really would be paying attention to that. For this particular bit, yeah, we're going to run with it. So I'm going to tie that in, then I'm going to chain up like I have at the back along the front, and we'll have a final look at it. Very, very last bit to do. So just a quick reminder, find the next group of however many threads you're putting in. However many you put in is very much up to you and the size of your project, and chain stitch it in. So last couple, bring that down, loop comes in front, the main thread, the one attached to the ball or cone behind, just pull the end of the loop through. Pull the end of the loop through. Now that's our very end loop. So wind off more than enough to tie off. Pull the end through, and then we'll just tie it off to the beam. I usually go all the way around once, and then I tie it off in a way that if I pull the end, it will come loose. So this has given us a set of weights, some at the front, they're going to stay put. The ones at the back are attached to the warp that's going to travel, that's going to come forward. Whoops, I've knocked my loom there, it slid sideways. Travel forwards and travel back. The chaining helps stop things tangling up. Hello Tesla. Say hello, there's always a cat in my work. Good example of why it's really, really important to chain at the bottom of your warps, because you get helpful cats. Are you in the way? You're always in the way, thank you Tesla. Okay, I think that is probably enough for this particular video. We've tied on our loom weights, trying to make sure that there's room for them to move. That one is touching the floor. I'll tie that up again a bit later, but most of them, little bits of swing underneath. Room for, oh, a cat to get in the way. Yes, there's always a cat in the way. Chaining right across to space those warp threads. And now looking up, you can see that we've got an evenly spaced, very gappy, as we said earlier, this is a very, very loosely set warp, bless you Tesla. Tied on at the top, we can even this out a little bit later, but for the moment this is fine. We've got our 2 sheds tidily arranged. The next thing we need to do is set up our heddle rods, and we will be doing that in the next video. Happy weaving, and I will see you very, very shortly when I've done the next bit.